On a snowy, rainy night, a restaurant owner was preparing to close his small eatery, on the brink of shutting down due to crushing debt. Suddenly he spotted a shivering boy in tattered clothes next to a frail old woman. Feeling pity for their plight, the man approached and invited them inside. The old lady hesitated, but seeing her grandson clutching his starving belly and coughing relentlessly, she agreed. After that night, they would never know their lives would change forever. Before we begin, please let us know where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel because tomorrow I have something special for you. The wind cut through Main Street like a knife that February evening, carrying flurries of snow that hadn't quite decided whether to stick or blow away. Michael Thompson stood behind the counter of Thompson's Diner, his fingers counting the same bills for the third time, hoping somehow the total would change. It didn't. 3 $20 bills, 2 5s and a handful of singles. $73. That was everything left in the register after a Thursday that had brought in exactly 4 customers. He slid the cash back into the drawer and closed it with more force than necessary. The sound echoed through the empty diner, bouncing off the worn red vinyl booths and the black and white checkered floor his father had installed 20 years ago. Only 2 tables still had customers, an elderly couple nursing coffee they'd ordered an hour ago and a trucker who'd stopped in for a late meal. The rest of the diner sat empty, the overhead lights reflecting off clean but aging surfaces. Michael's eyes drifted to the corkboard behind the counter. Red stamps screamed from every piece of paper pinned there. Final notice, overdue, past due, the electric company, the gas company, the bank, his landlord. Everyone wanted their money and he had nothing left to give them. His phone buzzed. Another text message. Michael, I've been more than patient. If I don't receive payment by the end of this week, I'll have no choice but to start eviction proceedings. I'm sorry, Tom. Michael set the phone down carefully, his jaw tight. Tom Harrison had been his landlord for 8 years. A decent man, but even decent men had bills to pay. Michael couldn't blame him. He could only blame himself for letting things get this bad. The wall clock showed 6:45. Outside, the streetlights were coming on, casting yellow pools on the snow-dusted sidewalk. Across the street, the new burger franchise blazed with neon and fluorescent light. Michael could see the line of cars wrapped around their drive-thru. He couldn't remember the last time his own diner had seen a line. He walked to the window and looked out. A family hurried past his door, the kids pointing excitedly at the bright signs across the street. The mother glanced at Thompson's Diner, seemed to consider it for half a second, then kept walking. Michael had watched that same scene play out 100 times in the past 6 months. Behind him, the ancient heater coughed and rattled, struggling to push warm air through decades-old vents. Michael had been meaning to get it serviced. Everything cost money he didn't have. He moved to the kitchen where a photograph hung on the wall above the prep station. His father, Thomas Thompson, standing in front of the diner on opening day in 1998. The same diner. The same location, but in that photo the place gleamed with hope and fresh paint. His father's smile was wide, his arm around Michael's shoulder. Michael had been 10 years old then, too young to understand what his father was building. Too young to know that one day it would all fall on his shoulders. His mother had died when he was 6, cancer. After that, it had just been the 2 of them. His father had poured everything into this diner, into making it a place where people felt welcome, where the coffee was always hot and the food always honest. He taught Michael everything. How to crack eggs with one hand. How to know when the grill was the right temperature just by holding your palm above it. How to remember a regular's order without writing it down. It's not just about food, Mikey, his father used to say. It's about making people feel like they belong somewhere. His father had died 14 months ago. Heart attack, sudden and cruel. Since then Michael had tried. God knows he'd tried. But trying wasn't enough when a corporate franchise opened across the street with prices he couldn't match and marketing budgets he couldn't dream of. Michael reached out and touched the frame of the photograph, a habit he'd developed whenever the stress built up too high. The glass was cool under his fingertips. I don't know what to do, Dad, he whispered to the empty kitchen. The trucker called out that he was heading out, leaving cash on the table. Michael thanked him, cleared the table and added the bills to the register. $18 and a $2 tip. $20 closer to nowhere. By 7:15, the elderly couple had left too, leaving exact change for their coffee and a smile that felt like pity. Michael thanked them anyway, locked the door behind them, and flipped the open sign to closed. He stood there for a moment, his hand on the door, his breath fogging the glass. Tomorrow would be Friday. Then the weekend. Then another week, then the final notice from the bank would come due. 14 days, that's what the letter had said. 14 days to make the payment or they'd begin foreclosure proceedings. He'd already spent the money that was supposed to go to the bank. He'd spent it on supplies, on keeping the lights on keeping the gas flowing to the stoves. What was he supposed to do? Close the diner to save the diner? It made no sense, but nothing made sense anymore. He turned off the lights in the dining area, leaving only the small lamp near the register burning. He needed to count inventory, to figure out what he could afford to order for next week, to do a dozen other things. But exhaustion pressed down on him like a physical weight. Michael grabbed his coat from the hook and was reaching for the deadbolt when movement outside caught his eye. Two figures huddled on the front step, partially hidden by the shadows between streetlights. An older woman and a small child, wrapped together in a thin blanket that did nothing to stop them from shivering. The woman was hunched over the boy, trying to shield him from the wind. The child's face was barely visible, but Michael could see his lips tinged with blue and hear the dry, hacking cough even through the glass door. Michael's hand froze on the lock. He should walk away. He should go out the back, go home, pretend he hadn't seen them. He had his own disaster to deal with. He couldn't save everyone. He couldn't even save himself. But the boy coughed again, a rattling sound that cut through the cold air, and the woman pulled him closer, whispering something Michael couldn't hear. Michael closed his eyes. He thought about the stack of bills on the corkboard. He thought about the bank's letter. He thought about 14 days. Then he thought about his father's voice. It's about making people feel like they belong somewhere. Michael took a deep breath, unlocked the door and pulled it open. The cold air rushed in, but he barely felt it. "Come inside," he said, his voice rougher than he intended. "It's too cold out here." The woman looked up, startled, her eyes wide with something between hope and fear. She started to shake her head, started to say they didn't want to be any trouble, but Michael cut her off. "Please," he said, stepping aside and holding the door wider. "Just come in." The woman stood slowly, stiff from the cold, one arm wrapped protectively around the boy. She hesitated at the threshold, her eyes darting past Michael into the diner, then back to the street, as if checking to see if anyone was watching. That's when Michael understood. She wasn't just cold and hungry, she was hiding. "It's okay," Michael said quietly. "Nobody's here but me." She finally stepped inside, keeping the boy close to her side. Michael closed the door behind them and turned the deadbolt. The boy couldn't have been more than 8 years old, his face gaunt, his coat too thin for February in Ohio. His cough rattled in his chest, wet and deep. "When did he start coughing like that?" Michael asked. "Few days ago," the woman said. Her voice was hoarse, tired. "It's getting worse." Michael nodded. He'd heard pneumonia before. His father had it once, years back. This sounded the same. "Sit down," he said, gesturing to the nearest booth. "Let me get the heat going better." The woman lowered herself onto the vinyl seat, the boy curling against her side. She kept the blanket wrapped around both of them, her eyes following Michael as he moved to the ancient radiator unit in the corner and cranked it as high as it would go. The metal clanked and groaned, but warm air started flowing. Michael grabbed 2 clean glasses from behind the counter and filled them with water from the pitcher he kept in the fridge. He brought them over, setting them gently on the table. "Drink," he said, slowly. The boy reached for his glass with both hands, his fingers trembling. He drank in small sips, like someone who'd learned not to waste anything. The woman did the same, though her eyes never left Michael, still wary, still waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Are you hungry?" Michael asked. "We don't want to be any trouble," the woman said quickly. "We'll just warm up a bit, and then we'll go. We won't bother you." "That's not what I asked." Michael kept his voice level, matter of fact. "I asked if you're hungry." The boy looked up at his grandmother, his eyes asking permission. She hesitated, pride and need warring on her face, then finally nodded. Yes, she whispered, we're hungry. Okay. Michael headed back to the kitchen, his mind already running through what he had left. Chicken soup. He'd made a big pot yesterday, hoping to sell it as a special. Only 2 bowls had sold. He pulled the pot from the fridge, set it on the stove, and turned on the burner. While it heated, he sliced bread, spread butter on it, and set it on a plate. He could hear them talking quietly in the dining room. The woman's voice, soothing. The boy's cough, interrupting every few words. The soup started to steam. Michael ladled it into 2 large bowls, added the bread to a basket, grabbed spoons and napkins, and carried everything out. The boy's eyes went wide when Michael set the bowl in front of him. He looked at the woman again, and she nodded. He picked up his spoon and started eating, quickly at first, then forcing himself to slow down, to be polite. The woman broke her bread into small pieces, giving the larger ones to the boy, eating the smaller ones herself. Michael watched from behind the counter, his arms crossed, saying nothing. The boy ate until the bowl was empty, then used the last piece of bread to soak up what remained. The woman finished more slowly, savoring each spoonful like it was the first warm meal she'd had in days. Because it probably was. When they were done, the boy leaned back against the booth, his eyes already heavy. The warmth, the food, the safety of being inside, it was all catching up to him. Thank you, the woman said softly. Thank you so much, don't mention it. Michael cleared the bowls, bringing them back to the kitchen. When he returned, the woman was looking at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. I'm Margaret, she said. This is Lucas, my grandson. Michael, he nodded toward them. This is my place. It's a good place, Margaret said, looking around the diner. Feels like the kind of place that's been here a long time. 28 years, Michael said. My father opened it. Is he passed, last year. I'm sorry. Margaret's voice carried the weight of someone who understood loss intimately. Lucas coughed again, harder this time, his whole body shaking with it. Margaret pulled him closer, rubbing his back until it subsided. Michael checked his phone. The temperature outside had dropped to 23 degrees. The wind chill would make it feel even colder. He looked at the boy's pale face, at the blue tinge that hadn't quite faded from his lips, and made a decision he knew he'd probably regret. There's a storage room in the back, Michael said. It's not much, but it's warm. You can stay there tonight. Margaret's head snapped up. We can't. Yes, you can. Michael's tone left no room for argument. That boy needs to be inside. He needs to be warm. I've got some blankets in the office. They're clean. You can leave in the morning, whenever you want. I'll open the back door early. Nobody will know you were here. Margaret's eyes filled with tears, though she blinked them back. Why are you doing this? Michael didn't have a good answer for that. He just knew he couldn't send a sick child back out into the cold. Because it's the right thing to do, he said finally. He led them through the kitchen to the storage room. It was small, cramped, lined with shelves of supplies and dry goods. But there was space on the floor, and it was warm. Michael brought 2 blankets from his office, the best ones he could find, and an old pillow that had seen better days. Don't touch the knives or any of the equipment, he said, laying out the blankets. And in the morning, when you hear me open up, just wait until I unlock the back door. You can leave that way. Lucas was already lying down, exhausted. Margaret tucked the blanket around him, then looked up at Michael. If anyone finds out, she started. Nobody's going to find out, Michael said. Get some rest. He closed the storage room door most of the way, leaving it cracked so they'd have air. Then he stood in the kitchen, staring at nothing, wondering what he'd just done. He was 14 days from losing everything, and he'd just given shelter to 2 people he didn't know. People who could get him in trouble with the health department, with his landlord, with any number of authorities who'd love a reason to shut him down faster. But when he looked back at the photograph of his father, he didn't feel regret. He felt something else, something that might have been hope. Michael turned off the lights, locked the front door, and headed out through the back, making sure it would open from the inside. He stood in the cold parking lot for a moment, his breath forming clouds in the air. Across the street, a man in an expensive overcoat was walking slowly past the storefronts, hands in his pockets, face thoughtful. Something about his posture suggested he wasn't just out for an evening stroll. He paused near the diner, glanced at the darkened windows, then continued on his way. Michael didn't think much of it. He climbed into his truck, started the engine, and drove home. What he didn't know was that the man in the overcoat had seen everything, had watched through the diner window as Michael invited the woman and child inside, had seen the kindness, the bowls of soup, the blankets. The man's name was Richard Williams, and he was very interested in what he'd just witnessed. Michael arrived at the diner at 5:45 the next morning, earlier than usual. The sun wouldn't rise for another hour, and the streets were empty, except for a few lonely streetlights and the distant sound of an early delivery truck. He unlocked the back door quietly, wondering if Margaret and Lucas were already awake, already gone. But when he stepped into the kitchen, he heard sounds from the storage room, water running, the soft murmur of voices. He started the coffee maker, the familiar ritual grounding him, and was pulling eggs from the fridge when Margaret emerged from the storage room. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her face washed. Behind her Lucas appeared, looking slightly better than he had last night, though he still coughed every few minutes. "Good morning," Michael said. Margaret looked almost embarrassed. "We were just about to leave. We didn't mean to." She stopped, seeing what was behind Michael. The dining room floor gleamed. The tables were wiped down. The salt and pepper shakers had been refilled and lined up precisely. The windows, which had been spotted and streaked yesterday, were spotless. "You didn't have to do that," Michael said. "Yes, we did." Margaret's voice was firm. "You gave us shelter. The least we could do was help." Lucas was standing near the counter, a dish towel in his small hands, looking uncertain. Michael noticed he'd been folding napkins, a neat stack of them already done. Something in Michael's chest tightened. He wasn't used to this, to people helping, to gratitude that showed itself in action, rather than words. "Thank you," he managed. Margaret nodded. She reached into her worn purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper, pressing it into Michael's hand. "Lucas wanted you to have this." Michael unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing, done in pencil on the back of what looked like a grocery store receipt. The diner, with people filling every booth, stick figures smiled and ate. Behind the counter, a larger figure stood with a ladle, steam rising from a pot. Above the door, a sign read "Open," in careful childish letters. In the corner, Lucas had drawn Michael smiling. "Lucas draws when he's nervous," Margaret explained softly, "or when he's happy. Last night was the first time he's been warm in 3 days." Michael stared at the drawing. In it the diner was alive, thriving, everything he'd once dreamed it could be. "This is really good, Lucas," Michael said, his voice rougher than he intended. "Thank you." The boy smiled shyly, then coughed into his elbow. The sound was worse than last night, wetter, more congested. Michael's phone rang. He glanced at the screen, and his stomach dropped. The bank. He sent it to voicemail, but they called back immediately. Persistent, he answered. "Hello, Mr. Thompson, this is Karen Mitchell from First National Bank. I'm calling about your commercial loan." "I know what you're calling about." Michael turned away from Margaret and Lucas, lowering his voice. "Mr. Thompson, we've been very patient, but we haven't received your last 3 payments. According to the terms of your loan agreement, we're required to inform you that you have 14 days from today to bring your account current. If we don't receive payment by the 21st of February, we'll be forced to begin foreclosure proceedings on the property." 14 days, just like the letter had said. "I understand," Michael said. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson. I really am. Your father was a good man. But this is business." "I understand," Michael repeated, and ended the call. He stood there, phone in hand, staring at nothing. 14 days to come up with $8,000. He might as well need 8 million. When he turned back, Margaret was watching him with concerned eyes. She didn't ask. She didn't need to. The look on his face said everything. "We should go," she said quietly. "We've taken enough of your time. Where will you go?" The question came out before Michael could stop it. Margaret's expression shuddered. "We'll be fine. We always manage," but Lucas coughed again, doubling over with the force of it, and Michael knew they wouldn't be fine. Not out there in the cold, not with the boy getting sicker by the hour. "Stay," Michael heard himself say. "Just for today. Rest. Let him get warm. I'll make breakfast. We can't keep." "Please." Michael met her eyes. "Let me do this." Margaret looked down at Lucas, at his pale face and shaking shoulders, and her resistance crumbled. "Just for today," she whispered. Michael cooked breakfast, scrambled eggs, toast, bacon he'd been saving. He made Lucas hot chocolate, watched the boy's eyes light up when he tasted it. They ate together in the booth nearest the kitchen, and for a little while, the diner felt less empty. At 7:30, Michael unlocked the front door and flipped the sign to open. He'd made a new special for the day, writing it on the chalkboard in his neatest handwriting. Homemade chicken soup with fresh bread, $7. $7 was cheap, cheaper than he could really afford, but maybe, just maybe, it would bring people in. The morning started slow, one customer at 8, another at 8:30. Michael served them, made small talk, tried to look confident, but his eyes kept drifting to the drawing Lucas had made, which he tucked behind the register. A diner full of people, a dream that felt further away every day. By 10 o'clock, Margaret had convinced Lucas to lie down in the storage room again. The boy needed rest, needed to fight off whatever infection was settling into his lungs. Michael could hear his coughs echoing from the back, each one sounding worse than the last. At 11, Michael stepped outside with a tray of sample cups, offering free soup to anyone who walked by. Some people took it, smiled, thanked him, then walked across the street to the burger place anyway. Faster, they said, more convenient. One woman took 3 sample cups, drank them all right there on the sidewalk, then walked away, without even looking at the menu. Michael stood there with his empty tray, watching the lunch rush flow into his competitor's parking lot, like a river, while his own diner sat quiet and still. 14 days, he looked down at his hands, his father's hands. His father used to say, strong hands, capable hands, but not strong enough to hold back foreclosure. When he went back inside, Lucas was standing by the counter, the drawing in his hands. He'd added something to it. A small sun in the corner, rays spreading across the sky, words beneath it, careful and hopeful. Thompson's Diner, the best place. Michael's throat went tight. "It's perfect, buddy." Lucas smiled up at him, then dissolved into another coughing fit, this one so violent, he had to grab the counter to stay upright. When it finally subsided, there were tears streaming down his face, and his lips had gone from pink to blue. Margaret rushed out from the storage room, her face pale with fear. "Lucas, baby, breathe, just breathe." But the boy couldn't catch his breath, couldn't stop shaking, and Michael knew with sudden terrifying certainty that they were out of time. Michael grabbed his keys from behind the counter, his movements sharp with urgency. "We're taking him to the hospital. Now." "We can't," Margaret started, but Michael cut her off. "Look at him, Margaret. He can't breathe." Lucas was gasping now, each inhale a struggle, his small chest heaving with effort. His skin had taken on a grayish tint that made Michael's stomach turn. This wasn't just a bad cold, this was serious. "I don't have insurance," Margaret said, her voice breaking. "I don't have money for. I don't care. Come on." Michael scooped Lucas into his arms. The boy weighed almost nothing, all sharp angles and fragile bones. He felt burning hot through his thin jacket, fever radiating like a furnace. Michael carried him through the kitchen, Margaret following close behind, her hands twisting together anxiously. The truck was still warm from this morning's drive. Michael laid Lucas across the back seat as gently as he could, then climbed into the driver's seat, while Margaret got in beside her grandson, cradling his head in her lap. "Thompson Memorial is 10 minutes away," Michael said, starting the engine. "He's going to be okay," but he wasn't sure. Lucas's breathing sounded terrible, wet and labored, punctuated by coughs that seemed to come from deep in his chest. Margaret stroked his hair, murmuring prayers under her breath, her own breathing quick and panicked. Michael drove faster than he should have, taking corners tight, running a yellow light that was half turned red. The streets blurred past. His hands gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. "He's all I have left," Margaret said suddenly, her voice raw. "My daughter, his mother, she died 3 years ago, cancer. His father left before Lucas was even born. It's just been us, just the two of us. I can't lose him. I can't." "You're not going to lose him," Michael said, hoping it was true. They pulled up to the emergency entrance. Michael parked illegally right in front of the doors, grabbed Lucas from the back seat, and ran. Margaret kept pace beside him, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The automatic doors slid open. The waiting room was busy, people in chairs, a baby crying somewhere, the smell of antiseptic and fear. Michael went straight to the desk, where a tired-looking nurse glanced up from her computer. "Please, he can't breathe," Michael said. "He's burning up. He needs help now." The nurse took one look at Lucas, at his blue-tinged lips and labored breathing, and hit a button on her desk. "I need a gurney and triage, stat." Everything moved fast after that. Medical staff appeared with a stretcher. They took Lucas from Michael's arms, laid him flat, checked his vitals with quick, efficient movements. Someone put an oxygen mask over his face. Someone else was taking his temperature, his blood pressure. "Fever of 103.8, a young doctor said. "Oxygen saturation at 87%, get him to room 4. They wheeled Lucas away, Margaret following close behind, her hand reaching out to touch his arm as they moved. Michael started to follow, but a hand on his shoulder stopped him. "Sir, are you family?" Michael hesitated. "I'm a friend. You'll need to wait here. We'll update you as soon as we can." Michael found himself standing alone in the hallway, his arms empty, his heart pounding. He walked back to the waiting room in a daze, sank into one of the plastic chairs and put his head in his hands. 20 minutes passed. 30. An hour. Finally Margaret emerged, her eyes red but dry. She sat down beside Michael without a word. "What did they say?" Michael asked. "Pneumonia. Severe. They're admitting him." Her voice was flat, shock smoothing out the emotion. "They've given him antibiotics, fluids, oxygen. They said if we'd waited even another day." Her voice cracked. "They said we got him here just in time." Michael let out a breath he hadn't known he was holding. "Thank God. They need payment information." Margaret's hands twisted in her lap. "The admission papers. Insurance. I don't have any of it. I lost our Medicaid when we lost the apartment. I haven't been able to reapply because I don't have a permanent address. I don't have anything." "How much?" Michael asked. "I don't know. Thousands probably. The emergency visit alone, and now admission, medicine, the room." "I can't." Margaret covered her face with her hands. "I've lost everything trying to keep him safe. My daughter's medical bills. Then losing my job because I had to take care of Lucas. Then the eviction. I thought if I could just keep him alive, keep him fed, eventually we'd figure it out. But I can't even do that." A woman in scrubs approached them, clipboard in hand. "Miss Watson, we need to go over the financial information for Lucas's admission." Margaret stood on shaking legs. Michael stood too. "I'll take care of it," he said. Both women looked at him. Margaret shook her head. "You can't." "I said I'll take care of it." Michael's voice was firm. "What do you need from me?" The woman led them to a small office. She went through the paperwork explaining costs. Emergency room fees. Admission fees. The estimated cost for a 3-day stay assuming no complications. Medication. Doctor consultations. The numbers climbed higher and higher. Michael felt something cold settle in his stomach as he listened. This wasn't hundreds. This was thousands. More money than he had. More than he could get. But he thought about Lucas's drawing. About the boy's shy smile. About the way he'd carefully folded those napkins this morning, trying to help, trying to be useful even though he was just a child who should have been worried about homework and cartoons, not survival. The woman finished her explanation and looked at him expectantly. "Will you be paying today or setting up a payment plan?" Michael pulled out his wallet. Inside was the envelope he'd been carrying for 2 weeks. The money he'd scraped together for the bank payment. Every dollar he could gather. It wasn't enough to save the diner, but it might buy him a little more time. Might keep the bank from starting foreclosure right away. His hand shook as he opened the envelope. $2,300 bills stared back at him. Every single dollar he had in the world. He thought about the bank's call this morning. 14 days. He thought about Lucas fighting to breathe. He made his choice. "I'll pay today," Michael said and handed over the money. The woman counted it carefully, then looked up. "This covers the emergency room visit and the first day of admission. We'll need another payment for the remaining days." "I'll bring it," Michael lied. When they returned to the waiting room, Margaret was shaking. "You can't do this. That money, you need it. I saw the bills at your diner. I saw the notices. You can't, it's done," Michael said simply. "Why?" The word came out as almost a sob. "Why would you do this? You don't know us. We're nothing to you." Michael looked toward the double doors where they'd taken Lucas. He thought about his father standing in this same hospital a year ago, taking his last breath while Michael held his hand. He thought about all the people who'd come to the funeral, who'd told him what a good man his father had been, how Thomas Thompson never turned away anyone who needed help. "My dad used to say the measure of a man isn't what he does when he has plenty," Michael said quietly. "It's what he does when he has nothing left to give." Margaret closed her eyes, tears finally spilling over. "I'll pay you back. I don't know how, but I will. I swear it. Let's just focus on getting Lucas better." They let Margaret see him an hour later. Michael waited in the hall, looking through the window at the small figure in the hospital bed, oxygen mask covering half his face, IV line in his thin arm. But his color was already better, his breathing steadier. He was going to be okay. Michael walked outside to move his truck from the emergency entrance. The sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. His phone buzzed. A text message from the bank. "This is a reminder that your payment is due in 13 days. It's a reminder that your payment is due in 13 days. Please contact us immediately to discuss your account." 13 days now. And $0 to his name. Michael leaned against his truck, tilted his head back and let out a long shaky breath. He'd just sacrificed the last chance of saving his diner for a child he'd met less than 24 hours ago. His father would have been proud. That thought was the only thing that kept him from breaking down completely. 3 days later, Lucas was released from the hospital. The antibiotics had done their job, his fever had broken, and his breathing had returned to normal. The doctor stressed the importance of rest, warm shelter, and follow-up medication. Margaret had nodded at everything, her face carefully blank, not mentioning that she couldn't guarantee any of those things. Michael picked them up in his truck. Lucas looked small in the passenger seat, wrapped in a hospital blanket they'd let him keep. He smiled when he saw Michael, a real smile this time, not dimmed by fever or fear. "Feeling better?" Michael asked. "Yes, sir. Thank you for helping me." "You're welcome, buddy." Michael drove them back to the diner, where he'd set up a temporary space in the small office upstairs. It wasn't much, just a cot he'd borrowed from a neighbor and some extra blankets, but it was warm and dry and private. Margaret had protested, but not as much as before. She was learning that arguing with Michael once he'd made up his mind was pointless. The diner felt different now. Margaret helped during the day, refilling coffee, bussing tables, cleaning. She refused to accept pay, insisting that room and board was more than fair. Lucas, still recovering, would sit in the corner booth with the coloring books and crayons Michael had picked up from the dollar store. Sometimes customers would stop and talk to him, charmed by his politeness and quiet demeanor. For a few days, Michael almost forgot about the deadline hanging over his head. Almost. On the 4th morning, he arrived early to find a small crowd gathered outside the diner. His heart jumped, thinking maybe word had spread about the food, maybe people were actually waiting for him to open. But as he got closer, he realized they weren't waiting, they were staring, talking. Some were taking pictures. "What's going on?" Michael asked a woman he recognized from the neighborhood. She looked uncomfortable. "There's been some talk about you, about the people you're letting stay here." "What kind of talk?" "Just talk. You know how people are." She wouldn't meet his eyes. Michael unlocked the door, his jaw tight. Inside he found Margaret already awake, cleaning the coffee maker. She'd seen the crowd too. "People are asking questions," she said quietly. "About us. About why we're here. Someone saw Lucas in the window yesterday and posted about it online, asking if you were running some kind of unlicensed shelter." "Let them talk. Michael, this could cause trouble for you." Real trouble. Maybe Lucas and I should. You should stay right here, Michael said firmly, until you have somewhere safe to go. But the damage was already done. All morning, customers came in with questions. Some were supportive, kind, they bought extra food, left bigger tips, but others were cold, suspicious. One man asked outright if Michael was exploiting the homeless for good PR. I'm not exploiting anyone, Michael said, struggling to keep his voice level. I'm helping people who need help, by letting them live in a commercial kitchen. That's got to be a health code violation. They're not living in the kitchen, they have a private space upstairs. Still seems sketchy. The man left without ordering. By afternoon a few more people had taken pictures, posted them online. Michael didn't have social media, but one of his regular customers, an older woman named Betty, showed him her phone. Look what they're saying, she said, her face troubled. Michael scrolled through the comments. Most were neutral or supportive, but some were ugly, accusing him of running a scam, of using the homeless angle to drum up business, of putting children at risk. This is ridiculous, Michael muttered, handing the phone back. I know, but people will believe anything these days. Betty patted his hand. You're doing a good thing, don't let them make you doubt that. The next morning, a man in a suit showed up. He introduced himself as Daniel Reeves, from the County Health and Safety Department. We've received some complaints, he said, pulling out a clipboard, about possible violations regarding housing individuals in a commercial food service establishment. They're not staying in the kitchen, Michael said. There's an apartment upstairs. It's zoned residential. I'll need to verify that. I'll also need to inspect your kitchen, storage areas, and check your permits. Michael's stomach sank, but he nodded. Of course. Reeves spent an hour going through everything, checking temperatures in the refrigerator, examining storage shelves, looking at Michael's permits and licenses. Margaret had taken Lucas for a walk, getting them out of the way, but their presence hung over the inspection like a question mark. Finally, Reeves closed his clipboard. Everything here looks fine. Your kitchen is clean, your permits are in order. The apartment upstairs is properly zoned for residential use. As long as you're not charging them rent without proper documentation, there's no violation. I'm not charging them anything. Reeves studied him for a long moment. The complaints also suggested you might be using their situation for publicity, running some kind of charitable campaign without proper documentation. I'm not running any campaign. I helped a sick kid. That's it. Have you solicited donations, posted about them online, made any public statements about helping the homeless? No, I haven't done any of that. Reeves made a note. Then I don't see a problem. But Mr. Thompson, I'd advise you to be careful. The person who filed the complaint was very insistent. They're clearly watching you closely. Who filed it? The complaints are anonymous. Reeves gave him a sympathetic look. But between you and me it sounded personal. Someone with an axe to grind. After Reeves left, Michael stood behind the counter trying to calm the anger building in his chest. Someone in this town had actively tried to get him shut down, had tried to use Margaret and Lucas as ammunition. The bell above the door chimed. A well-dressed man stepped in, someone Michael had never seen before. He was older, maybe mid-60s, with silver hair and an expensive coat. He looked around the diner with interest, then approached the counter. Are you Michael Thompson? He asked. That's me, I'm Richard Williams. I'd like to talk to you if you have a moment. I'm pretty busy, Michael said, even though the diner was almost empty. It'll just take a minute. It's about a business matter. Williams glanced around. Actually, it's about several business matters, including some difficulties you may be experiencing. Michael's guard went up. What kind of difficulties? The kind that involve banks and foreclosures and people trying to destroy your reputation. Williams' voice was calm, matter of fact. I'd like to help if you'll let me. Michael stared at him, trying to figure out the angle. Why would you want to help me? I don't even know you. No, but I know you. Williams pulled out a chair and sat down without being invited. I saw you, a few nights ago, saw you bring in that woman and her grandson, saw you feed them, give them shelter. I watched through your window because I was curious, wanted to see what kind of man you were. That's creepy, perhaps, but informative. Williams folded his hands on the table. I've been successful in business, Mr. Thompson. Very successful, but I've also been alone for a long time. My wife died 6 years ago. We never had children. I have more money than I could spend in 3 lifetimes and nobody to leave it to. So I watch people instead, looking for the ones who deserve help but never ask for it. I'm not a charity case. No, you're not. You're a man who gave his last dollar to save a child's life. I know about the hospital payment. I made some inquiries. Williams leaned forward. That money was supposed to go to the bank, wasn't it, to save this place? Michael's jaw tightened. That's none of your business. You're right, it's not, but I'd like to make it my business anyway. Williams pulled an envelope from his coat pocket and set it on the table. This is a certified check. Enough to pay your bank debt, with some left over to restock and make repairs. I'm also prepared to help with ongoing expenses until this place is back on its feet. Michael looked at the envelope like it might bite him. Why? Because 6 months ago, I came in here for lunch. I was having a bad day, low blood sugar, stress, too much work. I sat at that booth over there and ordered coffee, but before it came, I nearly passed out. You caught me before I hit the floor, brought me orange juice, made me eat, wouldn't let me leave until you were sure I was okay. You didn't charge me, didn't make a fuss, just helped. Michael remembered that day, vaguely. An older man who'd looked pale and shaky. That was you, that was me, and I've been watching this place ever since. Watching you struggle, watching you help people even when you have nothing, watching you choose kindness over survival. Williams pushed the envelope closer. Let me return the favor. Michael's hand shook as he picked up the envelope. Inside was a check for $15,000. This is too much, he said. It's not nearly enough. Williams stood up. Use it. Save your diner. Keep helping people. That's all I ask. He walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. Oh, and Mr. Thompson, the person who filed that complaint, they'll be back. They'll try to shut you down again. But next time, you won't be facing them alone. Then he was gone, leaving Michael standing there with $15,000 in his hands and absolutely no idea what to do with it. Michael didn't cash the check right away. He kept it in his pocket for 2 days, pulling it out periodically to make sure it was real, that he hadn't imagined the whole encounter. But the paper was real, the signature was real, and when he finally called the bank printed on the check, they confirmed it was legitimate. On the 3rd day, he deposited it. The teller's eyes went wide when she saw the amount, but she processed it without comment. Michael walked out of the bank, feeling like he could breathe for the first time in months. He paid off the loan, paid the electric bill, the gas bill, the rent, restocked the kitchen with quality ingredients, fixed the heater so it stopped coughing and rattling, had the refrigerator serviced, bought Lucas some new clothes and Margaret a warm coat. For the first time since his father died, Thompson's diner felt stable. Word spread about the inspection, about how Michael had been cleared of all charges. Some of the suspicious customers came back, shamefaced, ordering food and leaving generous tips. Business picked up slightly, not enough to call it thriving, but enough to feel like surviving. Margaret continued to help, and Michael finally convinced her to accept a small salary. Lucas, now healthy and energetic, helped fold napkins and set tables, chattering about school, and asking when he could go back. Margaret's face would cloud over at those questions, and she'd change the subject. Michael didn't push. He knew there were pieces of their story he hadn't heard yet, but he also knew they'd share when they were ready. 2 weeks after William's visit, things fell apart. It started on a Thursday. The lunch rush was decent. Maybe 15 people spread across the dining room. Michael was in the kitchen when he heard raised voices. He came out to find a man in a suit, arguing with Margaret. I'm telling you this isn't appropriate, the man was saying. Children shouldn't be working in restaurants. There are laws. He's not working, Margaret said, her voice tight. He's just helping his grandmother. It looks like child labor, and I've been hearing things about you two living here. About Mr. Thompson running some kind of under-the-table operation. That's not true, Michael said, stepping between them. They're guests, and Lucas isn't working. He's 8 years old, He's playing, working. What's the difference when there's a commercial interest involved? The man pulled out a business card. I'm Robert Chen, investigative reporter for the county newspaper. I've been getting tips about this place for weeks. People are concerned. People need to mind their own business, Michael said, his patience wearing thin. When it involves potential exploitation of vulnerable populations, it becomes everyone's business. Chen pulled out a small recorder. Do you have a comment about allegations that you're using homeless individuals for publicity and profit? I'm not using anyone for anything. Then why are they here? Because I'm helping them. Because it's cold outside, and a child was sick, and I'm not the kind of person who turns away people who need help. Noble words, but actions speak louder. Chen looked around the diner with calculating eyes. How much money have you made since they arrived? Has business improved? Business is none of your. Has anyone donated money to your cause? Has anyone set up a fundraiser? Are you receiving any financial benefit from their presence? Michael's hands clenched into fists. Get out. I'm a reporter doing my job. I have a right. You have the right to leave my restaurant. Now. Chen smiled, like he'd gotten exactly the reaction he wanted. I'll be back. With the health department, probably. Maybe social services too. If you're really helping these people, you won't mind the scrutiny. He left. The other customers had gone silent, watching. Some looked sympathetic, others looked troubled. Within minutes, half of them had paid and left, not meeting Michael's eyes. Margaret was shaking. This is my fault. We should go. Before we ruin everything you've built. You're not going anywhere, Michael said. But he knew this wasn't over. And he was right. The next day official notices came. Health Department, Fire Marshal, Zoning Board, all wanting to schedule inspections, all responding to concerned citizen complaints. Michael called Williams. The older man answered on the second ring. They're trying to shut me down, Michael said. I don't know who they are, but they're not going to stop. I know, Williams said calmly. I've been monitoring the situation. Don't worry, I have lawyers, good ones. They'll make sure everything stays above board. I don't want to fight. I just want to run my diner and help people who need help. Sometimes those things require fighting. Williams paused. Trust me, Michael, you're not alone in this. The inspections came over the next week. Fire Marshal found everything in order. Zoning Board confirmed the upstairs apartment was legal. Health Department gave the kitchen a perfect score. But Robert Chen kept digging. He published an article titled, Charity or Publicity Stunt, Local Diner Owner, Under Scrutiny. It was full of insinuations and carefully worded accusations that danced around libel. He made it sound like Michael was running some kind of scam, using Margaret and Lucas as props. The day the article came out, business dropped by half. Michael stood behind the counter, watching the empty booths, feeling the walls closing in. He'd survived the bank. He'd survived the inspections, but he couldn't survive being branded a fraud in his own community. That afternoon, Margaret came to him with an envelope. Her hands were shaking. I need to tell you something, she said, something I should have told you from the beginning. Michael looked at the envelope, at her trembling hands, and had no idea that what she was about to say would change everything. Margaret sat down across from Michael in the empty diner. Lucas was upstairs, drawing quietly in the apartment, giving them privacy. She placed the envelope on the table between them, but didn't open it yet. 3 years ago, she began, her voice steady but soft. My daughter Emily died of cancer. She fought for 18 months. I sold everything to help pay for her treatment. Our house, my car, everything. But it wasn't enough. She died anyway, and left behind medical debt we could never pay, and a 7-year-old son with no father. Michael listened without interrupting, his hands folded on the table. Lucas's father left before he was born. We never knew him, never got child support, nothing. So it was just me and Lucas. I tried to work, tried to take care of him, but I was grieving and exhausted, and I couldn't hold a job. We got evicted, lost everything that was left. For 3 years we've been on the streets, shelters when we could get in, motels when I could scrape together enough cash, the street when we couldn't.
She opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a check and official-looking documents. Emily's death wasn't just from cancer. She was hit by a drunk driver on her way home from a chemotherapy appointment. The cancer would have killed her eventually, but the accident killed her that day. There was a lawsuit. The driver's insurance company settled. $50,000. Michael's eyes widened. I've been carrying this check for 6 months, Margaret continued. Couldn't cash it. Couldn't bring myself to. Because cashing it meant accepting that she was really gone. That I was using her death to survive. I kept thinking if I just held on to it, if I just kept it safe, somehow it wouldn't be real yet. She pushed the check across the table to Michael, but Lucas almost died. In that hospital, watching him fight to breathe, I realized I'd been so focused on holding on to Emily, that I was letting Lucas slip away too. That money was meant to take care of her son, to give him a future, and you saved his life when I couldn't. Margaret let me finish. Her voice was firm now, stronger. You spent your last dollar on him. You gave up your diner for a child you just met. These people, this reporter, they're trying to destroy you because you helped us. I won't let that happen. She stood up, her shoulders straight, her chin lifted. I'm going to the newspaper. I'm going to tell them the truth, that you didn't exploit us, that you saved us, that every single accusation they've made is a lie. You don't have to do that. Yes, I do. She picked up the check, and I'm paying off your debt to the bank. All of it. Whatever's left, I'm using it to hire a lawyer to sue that reporter for libel. You've given us everything. It's time we gave something back. Before Michael could respond, the door chimed. Robert Chen walked in, his recorder already out. Mrs. Watson, I'd like to ask you some questions about your arrangement with Mr. Thompson, specifically about whether you've been coerced or, I'll give you a statement, Margaret said, her voice cutting through his words like a knife. But you're going to record every word I say, and you're going to print it exactly as I tell you, because if you don't, my lawyer will make sure you never work as a journalist again. Chen's eyebrows rose. Your lawyer? That's right, my lawyer. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. Mr. Williams, it's Margaret Watson. I'm ready to take you up on that offer. She'd been talking to Williams, had been planning this. Chen looked between them, confusion flickering across his face. Then the door opened again, and Richard Williams walked in, flanked by 2 people in expensive suits. Mr. Chen, Williams said pleasantly. I'm Richard Williams. You may recognize the name. I own the building your newspaper operates out of. I also own your parent company. We haven't met, but I've been reading your work with great interest. Chen's face went pale. Mrs. Watson has agreed to give you an exclusive interview, Williams continued, about her experience here, about how Mr. Thompson saved her grandson's life, about the settlement money she received, and how she's choosing to use it. It's quite a story, much better than the fiction you've been publishing. I've been reporting facts, Chen stammered. You've been reporting insinuations and implications while carefully avoiding actual facts. That ends today. William smiled, but there was steel in it. Shall we all sit down? They sat. Margaret told her story, every detail, while Chen's recorder captured it all. She explained about Emily, about the settlement, about being homeless, about the night Michael found them freezing on his doorstep. She explained about Lucas's pneumonia, about Michael using his last money to save a child he barely knew.
He didn't ask for recognition, Margaret said. He didn't post about it online, he didn't call the news, he just helped, because that's who he is, and you tried to destroy him for it. By the time she finished, Chen looked sick. I want a retraction, Williams said calmly. Full retraction of your previous article plus a front-page feature telling the real story. You have 24 hours. Chen nodded mutely and left his recorder clutched in his hand. After he was gone, Margaret finally let herself cry. Michael stood and wrapped his arms around her. This woman who'd been carrying so much weight for so long. You didn't have to do that, he said. Yes, I did, she said into his shoulder. You gave us our lives back. The least I could do was fight for yours. Williams cleared his throat. I took the liberty of contacting a few friends in local government. The harassment will stop. the investigations will close, and if anyone tries to come after you or this diner again, they'll have to go through a team of lawyers first." "Why?" Michael asked. "Why do all this?" "Because I've spent 6 years alone watching the world go by, wondering if there were any good people left in it." Williams looked around the diner. "You reminded me that there are. That's worth protecting." The next day the newspaper ran a front-page retraction and apology. The day after that they published Margaret's story. The phone started ringing. People calling to apologize, to offer support, to say they'd be coming in for dinner. By the end of the week Thompson's diner was fuller than it had been in months. The morning after the new article ran, Michael arrived to find a line of people waiting outside the diner. Not a huge crowd, maybe 20 people, but more than he'd seen in over a year. His hands shook as he unlocked the door. "We're here to support you," one woman said as she entered. "What you did for that family, it matters." "I just did what anyone should do," Michael said, overwhelmed. "But most people don't," she replied. "That's the point." The breakfast rush was steady. People ordered food, left generous tips, took pictures of their meals to post online with supportive captions. A few brought donations, cash in envelopes that they pressed into Michael's hands despite his protests. "Use it for the next person who needs help," one elderly man said. "Pay it forward." By noon Michael had to call in Margaret to help manage the crowd. She'd been upstairs with Lucas, trying to stay out of the way, but he needed her. She came down, tied on an apron, and dove in like she'd been doing this her whole life. Refilling coffee, taking orders, clearing tables with efficient grace. Lucas sat in his usual corner booth, coloring, but now customers stopped to talk to him, asking about his drawings, telling him he was brave. He smiled shyly at the attention, gradually warming up. Richard Williams came in at 1 o'clock. Michael served him personally, a bowl of the chicken soup that had started everything. "This is good," Williams said after his first taste. "Really good. Have you ever thought about expanding? Opening a second location?" "I can barely manage this one," Michael said. "Not anymore, you can't." Williams gestured at the full dining room. "This is sustainable now. With proper management and investment this could become something bigger." "I don't want something bigger. I just want to keep the doors open." Williams studied him thoughtfully. "What if I invested? Not as charity but as a legitimate business partnership. I provide capital and business expertise. You provide the heart and soul of the operation. We turn this into a model that could be replicated. Diners that serve good food and help their communities." "That sounds complicated." "It would be. But it would also help a lot of people." Williams leaned back. "Think about it. No pressure. But the offer stands." That evening after closing, Michael, Margaret, and Lucas sat in a booth sharing dinner. It had become a ritual over the past few weeks, a family meal at the end of the day. "People were nice today," Lucas said, dragging a French fry through ketchup. "They smiled a lot." "They did," Margaret agreed. She looked at Michael. "You've built something good here, something that matters." "We built it," Michael corrected. "You've been working just as hard as me. I've been trying to pay back a debt." "There's no debt." "There never was." They ate in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Lucas spoke up, his voice small. "Are we going to stay here, or do we have to leave again?" Margaret's face crumpled. "Baby, I don't know. We need to find our own place. We can't live here forever." "Why not?" Lucas looked between them with wide eyes. "I like it here. I like Michael. Can't we stay?" Michael's chest tightened. He'd been thinking about this same question. The apartment upstairs was small, barely suitable for 2 people, let alone 3. But the thought of them leaving, of going back out into uncertainty, made something in him rebel. "What if you didn't have to leave?" he heard himself say. Margaret looked up sharply. "What?" "The apartment upstairs. It's not much, but it's yours if you want it. You could stay, help run the diner. We could make it official. Give you a real salary, benefits, everything." "Michael, we can't." "Why not? You're good at this. Lucas is happy here, and honestly," he paused, searching for the right words. "I'm tired of doing this alone. My dad always said a diner should be a family business. Maybe it still can be." Margaret's eyes filled with tears. "You mean that?" "I wouldn't say it if I didn't." Lucas bounced in his seat, excitement breaking through his usual reserve. "Really, we can really stay? If your grandmother says yes." Margaret wiped her eyes, laughing and crying at the same time. "Yes. God, yes." "Thank you." They sealed it with a handshake, then Lucas insisted on a group hug, his small arms barely reaching around both adults. The next week, Williams returned with contracts. "Gave your grandmother settled with contracts." He'd structured a partnership that gave Michael control of operations while providing capital for expansion and improvements. Part of the agreement included a commitment to community service, a formal program to help people in need. Every Saturday morning, Williams suggested, "Free breakfast for anyone who walks through that door. No questions asked, no judgment, just good food and kindness." "That'll cost money," Michael said. "I'm aware, that's what the investment is for." Williams smiled. "Consider it my contribution to making the world slightly less terrible." They shook on it. The first Saturday, Michael wasn't sure what to expect. He and Margaret arrived early, prepared food for maybe 20 people, and waited. By 8 a.m. there were 40 people lined up outside, families, single mothers, elderly folks on fixed incomes, veterans, students, homeless individuals, all waiting quietly, respectfully for the doors to open. Michael let them in and they came, filling every booth, every table. Margaret poured coffee and orange juice. Lucas helped set out napkins and utensils, taking his job very seriously. Williams showed up to help serve, rolling up his sleeves and carrying plates like he'd done it his whole life. No one asked why people were there. No one demanded proof of need. If you walked through the door on Saturday morning, you got fed. A woman with 2 small children cried when Michael brought her plate. "Thank you," she whispered. "We haven't had a hot meal in 3 days." An older veteran, his jacket covered in military patches, shook Michael's hand. "This reminds me of the mess hall, the good kind, where everyone was equal." By the end of the morning, they'd served 87 people. The kitchen was a disaster. They were exhausted, and Michael had never felt better in his life. "Same time next week?" Williams asked, washing his hands at the sink. "Same time next week," Michael agreed. Lucas had fallen asleep in the corner booth, his head pillowed on his arms, a small smile on his face. Margaret covered him with a blanket, then turned to Michael. "I spent 3 years trying to survive," she said quietly. "Now I feel like I'm finally living again." "Thank you for that." "Thank you for staying," Michael replied. "This place was just a building before. Now it feels like home." Outside, the first snow of March was starting to fall, soft and light. But inside Thompson's diner, everything was warm. The Saturday breakfast program became the heartbeat of Thompson's diner. Every week more people came. Word spread through shelters, churches, community centers. Some weeks they served 100 people, some weeks more. Michael established rules early: no proselytizing, no photography without permission, no treating the guests like charity cases or objects of pity. They were customers, same as anyone else. They just didn't pay. Margaret managed the program with quiet efficiency. She knew how to talk to people who'd been through hard times, because she'd been there herself. She knew when to chat and when to leave people alone. She knew that sometimes people needed more than food, they needed to be seen as human. Lucas, now thriving in a local school thanks to Margaret's settlement money covering their living expenses, became the unofficial greeter. He'd stand by the door on Saturday mornings, directing people to seats, handing out coloring pages to kids who looked scared or overwhelmed. "I used to be scared too," he'd tell them. "But this place is safe. Michael makes really good pancakes." His simple honesty put people at ease in ways adult reassurance never could. Williams became a regular presence, not just on Saturdays but throughout the week. He'd sit at the counter, drinking coffee and working on his laptop, offering business advice when asked, and staying quiet when not. His investment had transformed the diner's finances. The equipment was all updated. The building was properly maintained. There was money for quality ingredients and fair wages, but more than that, his presence brought legitimacy. When the owner of Williams Industries was seen regularly eating at Thompson's diner, other business owners paid attention. They started coming in for lunch, bringing clients, hosting small business meetings over coffee and pie. The diner was thriving. One Saturday in April, a woman came in with 3 children, all under 10. They sat quietly at a table, the kids' eyes huge as they looked at the plates of food Margaret set in front of them. The woman ate nothing herself, just watched her children eat, her expression caught between relief and shame. Michael noticed. He always noticed. He made an extra plate, loaded it with eggs and bacon and toast, and brought it to her himself.
I'm not hungry, she said quietly. I made too much. Would hate for it to go to waste. Michael set it down and walked away before she could protest further. From the corner of his eye, he saw her pick up her fork, saw her take a bite, saw her close her eyes, like she was praying. After the breakfast service ended, the woman approached him. I need to tell you something, she said. You don't have to tell me anything. I want to. She took a breath. 6 months ago I had a job, an apartment, a decent life. Then I got sick, really sick, couldn't work, lost the job, lost the apartment. My kids have been staying with friends and family, bouncing around while I tried to get back on my feet. This is the first time in 2 months we've all been together, and the first real meal we've shared. Michael's throat tightened. I'm glad you came. I saw the article about you, about what you did for that woman and her grandson. I almost didn't believe it. People don't really do things like that, I thought, but you do. You actually do. Her eyes were wet. Thank you for proving me wrong. She left her children waving goodbye to Lucas, who waved back enthusiastically. Williams had watched the whole exchange. You're changing lives, you know that. I'm just serving breakfast. No, you're giving people hope. You're showing them that kindness still exists. That's worth more than any meal. That afternoon, Michael found Lucas in the kitchen, carefully arranging crayons in rainbow order. His tongue stuck out slightly, his face serious with concentration. What are you working on, buddy? Michael asked. A sign. For next Saturday. Lucas held up a piece of poster board. In careful, colorful letters he'd written, Welcome to Thompson's Family Kitchen. Everyone belongs here. Family kitchen. Not diner. Kitchen. Michael felt something shift in his chest. That's perfect, Lucas. Really perfect. Is it okay if I put family? Even though it's not really our family. Michael crouched down to Lucas's level. What makes someone family, do you think? Lucas considered this seriously. People who take care of you, who make sure you're safe. That sounds right to me. And by that definition, what are we? Lucas's face broke into a huge smile. Family. Exactly. So the sign is perfect. That evening Michael called a meeting. Margaret, Lucas and Williams gathered in the diner after closing. I've been thinking, Michael said, about what this place is, about what it could be. And I think Lucas here figured it out before any of us did. He showed them the sign. Thompson's Family Kitchen. Margaret read aloud, her voice soft. If you're all okay with it, I'd like to change the name. Officially, Thompson's Diner becomes Thompson's Family Kitchen. A place where everyone who walks through that door is part of the family. I love it, Margaret said immediately. Williams nodded approval. It's perfect, honest, true. Can we really change it? Lucas asked. Will the bank let us? The bank doesn't own this place anymore, Williams said. Michael does. We do. We can call it whatever we want. They ordered a new sign the next day, custom-made, hand-painted in the same style as the original but with the new name. While they waited for it to be finished, Lucas's poster board version hung in the window. People noticed, people commented. People took pictures and shared them online. Thompson's Family Kitchen. I love that, one regular said. That's exactly what this place has always felt like. The day the new sign arrived, the whole town seemed to show up for the unveiling. It had been installed overnight, and they'd covered it with a sheet. At noon, Michael, Margaret, Lucas and William stood together in front of the diner. 3 months ago, Michael said to the gathered crowd, this place was dying. I was 14 days from losing it. Then 2 people showed up on my doorstep, freezing and hungry, and helping them changed everything. He looked at Margaret and Lucas. They reminded me what my father always knew, that a diner isn't about food, it's about people, it's about community, it's about making sure everyone has a place to belong. Margaret pulled the sheet away, revealing the new sign, Thompson's Family Kitchen, in bold welcoming letters. The crowd applauded. Lucas beamed, proud of the name he'd inspired. Williams shook Michael's hand, his grip firm and warm. Your father would be proud, Williams said quietly. Michael looked up at the new sign, imagining his father standing beside him, smiling that wide smile from the old photograph. Yeah, Michael said, I think he would be. 6 months after the sign went up, Thompson's Family Kitchen had become the heart of the community. Not just a place to eat, but a gathering spot, a safe harbor, a second home for dozens of people who'd found their way there through various paths of hardship or hope. The Saturday morning program had expanded. They now served breakfast from 7 to noon, and on particularly cold winter days, they stayed open all afternoon, offering soup and sandwiches to anyone who needed warmth. Margaret had officially become co-manager, her name on the business license right next to Michael's. She handled scheduling, inventory, and dealt with suppliers while Michael focused on cooking and maintaining the kitchen. They worked together like they'd been partners for decades rather than months. Lucas, now 9 years old and thriving in 4th grade, still helped on Saturdays and after school. He'd become something of a mascot for the place, his artwork decorating the walls, his cheerful greetings making everyone smile. Williams had invested in 2 more locations, identical models in neighboring towns. Each one was run by someone Michael had met through the Saturday program, someone who needed a second chance and proved they could handle the responsibility. Each one offered the same Saturday morning breakfast, the same commitment to community, but the original Thompson's family kitchen remained the flagship, the heart of it all. On a Friday evening in September, Michael stood in the kitchen preparing for the dinner rush. The stoves were all fired up, filling the air with the smell of cooking onions and grilling meat. He moved through the space with practiced ease, his father's training evident in every efficient motion. The bell over the door chimed constantly. The dining room was full, not fancy full, not expensive full, but honest full. Working families, students from the community college, elderly couples on fixed budgets, people who wanted good food at fair prices, served with genuine care. Margaret worked the floor, her apron pockets full of order pads and pens, her face relaxed and happy in a way it hadn't been when Michael first met her. She'd put on weight, healthy weight, and her eyes had lost that hunted, desperate look. Lucas sat at the counter doing homework under Williams's supervision. The older man helped with math problems between bites of meatloaf, his expensive suit jacket hanging on the back of his chair, his sleeves rolled up. This was what family looked like. At 7 o'clock, the door opened and a young couple entered, hesitant, a baby bundled in the woman's arms. They looked around nervously, like they weren't sure they belonged. Michael recognized that look. He'd seen it on Margaret's face 6 months ago, on his own face in the mirror during those dark 14 days. He wiped his hands on his apron and walked over. Evening, table for 3. We heard about this place, the man said quietly. About the Saturday thing. But we didn't want to wait until Saturday. We can pay. We have a little money, but not much. That's fine, Michael said. Saturday's for everyone, but we're open 7 days a week. What can I get you? They ordered carefully, cheaply, 2 cups of soup to share, 1 sandwich split between them. Water instead of sodas. Michael brought them what they ordered, plus a basket of fresh bread, plus a side of vegetables, plus a dessert he claimed was extra from another order even though it wasn't. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Thank you, she whispered. Later, as they were leaving, the man pressed a crumpled $20 bill into Michael's hand. It's all we have, but we wanted to pay something. Keep it, Michael said, pressing it back. Use it for the baby. We can't, you can, and you will. Come back next week. Things will look different then. They always do. After they left, Williams approached. You gave away half their meal. I charged them for what they ordered. You know what I mean, but Williams was smiling. You're still doing it, still helping everyone who walks through that door. Someone helped me once, Michael said. Seems only fair to pass it along. That night, after closing, Michael stood alone in the empty dining room. The lights were dimmed, the chairs were up on the tables, ready for morning cleaning. Everything was quiet and still. He walked to the wall where Lucas's first drawing still hung, framed now. The sketch of a diner full of happy people. A dream that had seemed impossible 6 months ago, except it wasn't a dream anymore. It was real. His phone buzzed. A text from Margaret. Lucas wants to know if you're coming to his soccer game tomorrow. He's very insistent that you be there. Michael smiled and typed back, wouldn't miss it. Tell him I'll be the one cheering the loudest. 3 dots appeared. Then you're a good man, Michael Thompson. Don't ever forget that. He pocketed his phone and turned off the last light. Through the window the new sign glowed softly in the darkness. Thompson's family kitchen. His father had built a diner. Michael had built something more. A place where people didn't just eat, they belonged. They healed. They found their way back to hope. As he locked the door and walked to his truck, Michael thought about those 14 days 6 months ago, when he'd stood right here beaten down and broken, ready to give up. He thought about the choice he'd made that cold night, to open the door, to let them in, to choose kindness when he had nothing left to give. That choice had cost him everything he thought he had, but it had given him everything that actually mattered. Michael climbed into his truck, started the engine and drove home. Tomorrow would come early. Saturday breakfast service would start at 7. There would be people to feed, lives to touch, hope to restore. And Michael Thompson, once a man counting his last dollars and final days, couldn't wait to get started. Because he'd finally learned what his father had tried to teach him all along. Success wasn't measured in profits, it was measured in people, in kindness, in the family you built along the way, and by that measure Thompson's family kitchen was the richest place in town.
Join us to share meaningful stories by hitting the like and subscribe buttons. Don't forget to turn on the notification bell to start your day with profound lessons and heartfelt empathy.